All right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking about asking qualitative questions. My name is Dr. Michael Garver, professor of marketing. Fire up chips. Let's go get them. So let's talk about a couple characteristics of qualitative questions first, and then I'm going to show you how to ask two specific questions that get very specific types of information that are very valuable to us as marketers and market researchers. Let's get started. So the first thing we want to think about when we ask qualitative questions is they need to be open-ended. Close-ended questions kind of have a yes or no type of answer. If you get a yes or no answer, or a yes or no answer is possible, it is not correct, right? So we want to be very open-ended, and I actually like to think of very big picture broad to start with in particular. Indirect questions. Sometimes we don't just get very specific in there. We're very indirect. And why do we do that? Why can't we just ask them directly what we want to know? Because in qualitative, we want them to kind of get to, we want to let them tell their story in their way. And if we get too pointed in our questions, we don't let them do that. So an indirect question is generally a better way to do it. And when they talk about what's important to them, we'll get more specific. All right. The other thing I really think this is important is to have them talk about and think about their past experiences when you ask them questions. If they think about specific concrete examples from their past, then the detail is much more vivid, much more rich data we get when they're doing that versus not talking about that. All right. Let's get started. So sequencing broad to specific, we really want to start big picture, very broad, and we don't want to get too detailed in our questions. And so we start off with generally context questions. I'm going to teach you how to answer that. Is probably about as broad and open-ended as you can get. Grand tour questions is a little bit more focused. And so we probably would want to go context questions first, grand tour questions second if we're going after both of those. Okay, so context questions. The purpose, and remember that I'm objective driven, is to learn about their background, right? That's the objective here. So if you need to learn about, in general, about their background, then context questions are perfect for it. Let's get started. Let me give you a couple examples. So think about this person who lives in this house. Can you imagine that the context of their life choices? Can you imagine what influences behind the scenes, right? And if we could learn what life is like as a multi-billionaire, then if we just kind of get that big picture, then we'll understand how they make decisions about buying 18 cars, for example, right? Versus if you lived here, right? Can you imagine the background, kind of the context of the people who live here? If you kind of understand their background, how they see the world, then you're going to be able to understand a lot of the choices that they make, and that's why it's so valuable. So, and the same thing goes to foreign countries, right? Like oftentimes different countries have very different product usage, or they view it just everything's so differently. Why? Is because we have different cultures, different contexts, different backgrounds, and it has a major influence on our decision making. So at the end of the day, we need to learn about this context, this background, so that we understand the broader perspective of how they make choices. All right, so let's give you an example of context and culture questions. Don't you love this? They're getting married with the Roddy there. Of course, she's pregnant, and they're smoking and drinking. There you go. Good, nice teeth too, by the way. So. All right, so tell me about life growing up in Grayling, Michigan, right? So I lived in Grayling once, so I can do that. So anyhow, this is a context question, and if it was those people that just tell me about life growing up in Grayling. What was it like? There we go. If we're interviewing professors and we want to get the background or context, we'd ask a question about, tell me about life as a professor. Okay? Pretty much it's tell me about life as whatever you're studying, and it's that simple. So if you want to study softball coaches, tell me about life as a softball coach. Tell me about life as a student at CMU, right? And so the bottom line is, tell me about life at whatever you're studying. That's a context question. It lets them go wherever they want to go, and you're going to learn about the critical things that are kind of living in their context. Grand tour questions are kind of when we take a tour. It's a process, right? And that's the Biltmore House. And if you think about it, when you go in the Biltmore House, which is in North Carolina, it's very cool, by the way. If you ever get a chance to go visit it, go visit it. But if you think about a tour of this house, you go from one room to the next room, and it's very much learning about a process, right? So grand tour questions, whenever you want to learn about a process, which is nothing more than a series of steps kind of put together, a grand tour question is very good at that. Let's get into this. So one of the first things I like to do, though, is get them to think about their past experience, right? So if you think about the last time you signed up for classes, give them a long pause so that they can think about that. Start at the very beginning and walk me through all the steps until you're finished. Say, for example, you're signed up for classes, right? That's one way we would do it. Think about this one. Think about the last time you selected a textbook. Long pause. Walk me through how you make that decision, starting at the very beginning. I need to select a textbook. And then tell me about each of the steps until that decision is made. A great example about it. So what I try to do is get them to think about their past experience, give me the starting point, give them the ending point, and then tell me to give me all the steps and lots of details. These are two great examples of how to ask a grand tour question. Now, we're only going to have those two questions in qualitative. I used to kind of have questions designed to ask all of these, but we're focusing on the top two. And so what I want you to think about is, in this information matrix, we talked about context. If you want to learn about context, really the only way to get that information is qualitative. Process, the same way. If you want to learn about the process people take for just about anything, the only way that you can do that, is to do it well at least, is through qualitative. Now, I showed you how to do process for talking to people and asking questions, but process can also be qualitative observation. And lots of times, if it's observable process, observation is an excellent tool, either to research, triangulate, or just on its own. Okay, so those are the only two pieces of information that we can only get them through qualitative, and so we're going to focus on those two pieces of information. But I wanted to see how it fits into the whole big picture of the information we need to drive strategy. All right, my friends, we've started talking about qualitative questions and how to ask them. I look forward to seeing you in the next exciting episode of Marketing 450.